So I think that I might need to jump in and retake the screen and redo a sharing because I'm wondering if maybe we lost Mackenzie. Mackenzie, can you, oh, nope, here it is. Okay, great. Thank you for advancing the slide, Mackenzie. Uh, this is Colette DePhelps with the University of Idaho Extension, and I'm just going to go over a couple of webinar tips for today's meeting. And one of the things that will be really helpful is if each of our panelists can remain muted unless they're talking. For all those that have come in and are watching today, you are already muted. If you close all of the other programs that are running on your computer, you will probably have a better experience in terms of the bandwidth that you can dedicate to your sound and seeing the slides advance. If at any time you're having problems with your sound where the speed is slowing down or it's getting very staticky, you can type into the chat box and let us know if you're having problems. We'll let you know if that's unique to you or everyone is experiencing the same difficulties. As you can see in this slide, there is a call-in number. At any time you can switch to the phone. If you do that, you'll want to mute your computer so that you don't get feedback. You can type questions for the presenters in at any time, again, into that box that you'll find in your control bar, and there will be time for Q&A during this program. A recording will be made available to you through the Moscow Chamber of Commerce Facebook page. So with that, I just want to hand everything over to Jenny Ford to welcome everyone.
Thank you so much, Colette. Colette, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you for the folks that are on the call. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to give a big thank you to University of Idaho Extension, specifically to Colette DePhelps that you just heard from, as well as Mackenzie Lawrence. They were really helpful in regard to setting this up, and we really appreciate their support of creating this platform for us that the Chamber of Commerce doesn't currently have. So thank you very much. I do have the privilege of introducing Paul Kimmel. He serves as the Regional Business and Public Affairs Manager with Avista Corporation, and he is going to be serving as our moderator today. So with that, welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Jenny. And again, thanks, Colette and Mackenzie. Great job putting this together, and appreciate the technology support. So with that, let's move to the next slide, maybe, Mackenzie, please. Thank you. So again, we're going to try and keep this very conversational, but we want to give our legislators a little time to try and address the following questions. What are we hearing? Us and our business community, and any other information and resources we can provide our businesses. So again, please type your questions into the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll make sure that they get posed to the legislators. So I will open it up and offer it out to our legislators, and who'd like to get going for us? Carolyn, would you like to go?
Sure, I'll go. So you just would like us to share a little bit about how the session went? Is that correct? You're muted, Paul.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing to just maybe a brief recap. We never did have that last coffee with you all. So maybe, maybe a minute on that or two, but I think most of us on the phone here are more interested about the days ahead.
Sure. So I serve on the Agricultural Resources, Judiciary and Rules, and the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee. And as you can imagine, the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee continues to have a lot of conversation about how the budget is functioning for this year, on where the financials are for the state next week. They've sent a preliminary one to our office of at JFAC, but it has not been released yet. So I think everybody's very anxious to see what that looks like. I just wanted to thank folks in this district. I had a really fun session. I had a lot of legislation that came from District 5. So just I actually had 18 bills that I carried. 16 of them were law, but the ones that came out of District 5 that I thought were particularly meaningful to me. There was one that I heard from a constituent a couple of years ago about a way for emergency medical responders to know that there is medical information in the vehicle if they're unable to speak for themselves. It's called the Yellow Dot program. So we passed that. I have a constituent who's been trying to expand how shooting ranges can be developed in Idaho and try and get folks off of the public lands and shooting at fence posts and street signs. And he's been trying to do this for 12 years. And so we were able to get that piece of legislation through.
Could I jump in for just a minute?
Sure,
Representative Troy, I just wanted to tell you that when you turn your head to the side, we lose a lot of your volume. So if you can face your mic, that would be helpful.
All right, I'll put my list in front of me. And then it was an honor to work with the Coeur d'Alene tribe on a piece of legislation bringing attention to the plight of Indigenous people, for missing and murdered Indigenous people. And so we passed a resolution regarding that, and we're able to secure some funding for an ongoing program for that. So I also chair the 4-H Know Your Government program from the legislative side. So I love seeing those 4-H kids come and supporting that University of Idaho program. And bipartisan group formed a farm, ranch, and timber caucus, and we had weekly meetings and talked about issues of importance to rural Idaho. So that was it for me. Hopefully I'm sounding better.
Yeah, you were still fading in and out a little bit, Carolyn, but that's okay. It is what it is. So thank you. And maybe we'll
Paul, do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Paul. Just a quick rundown on, there's two major areas that I emphasized being on the Education Committee in the House, and I was able to get House Bill 523 through, which added the third rung to the career ladder and it's called the Advanced Professional Teacher. And in that bill, it has several accountability issues, but not only for teachers, but also for superintendents. And it actually, over the next 5 years, it gets up to about $63,000 as a salary. And of course, the local district can add to that if they so desire. The other bill is, another bill I got through was House Bill 624, which terminated or sunset the master education premium. Those dollars that'll be saved will now be applied to the third rung cost. Then Senate concurrent resolution 132 established an interim committee, or hopefully will establish an interim committee that'll take a look at Idaho content standards. And the same thing for the Senate concurrent resolution 120 that establishes an interim committee for Idaho standard achievement test research alternatives. That'd be getting away from ASPAC and looking for what better ways to test the performance. Of course, then voted for all and supported strongly all the appropriations for University of Idaho, and especially the funding for the University of Idaho medical programs. One disappointment I had in education was Senate Bill 1285, which was a school board training. It got through the Senate, it got through the House committee that it was held because we adjourned. Over on the veteran side, Senate Concurrent Resolution 133, which we are designated the month of May as the Military Veterans Caregivers Hidden Heroes Month. And then I also carried a bill that was Senate Bill 1371, which when a military person is deployed, sometimes if it's a single person, there's a concern about guardianship. We address that issue, so when that service person comes back, he can terminate that guardianship and resume his parental duties. House Bill 388 treats the school-age dependents of military coming into the state of Idaho as if they were already here, so they can participate in the charter school lotteries as well as any other special classes. House Bill 552, we took a look at the disability veterans and their home tax exemption credits, and we expanded that to include the 100% that are identified as unemployable. And then Senate Concurrent Resolution 123 was we improved the funding for vet cemeteries in the veterans' homes with a federal grant. And then let's see, major disappointment on that was House Bill 485, which was a bill I carried to get the Department of Veterans Service, especially for the veterans' homes, some additional nursing help. And that got hung up in the committee and never got to the floor. It was a credit for hours worked, and there's a group of people that just don't believe in adding anything that deals with credit, so it didn't make it. That's about it for me today, and I've got a couple other things later on.
Thank you, Representative Goesling. Senator Nilsson, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Well, I'll just be brief on the legislature. The session, it seems like 100 years ago to me at this point. It's hard to even conceive that we were in Boise not just a month ago. I guess just a couple issues. I work a lot on transportation issues and was able to help co-sponsor a distracted driving bill this year. So kind of keeps us from using our cell phones when we're driving. You can still do hands-free. You know, you can speak to your phone and call, or, you know, as long as you're not touching the phone, you're okay. The other sort of success and failure I had in transportation this year is we were able to appropriate a bit of money from the sales tax for transportation to fix local bridges, which are a big problem. We have about $50 million, $500 million, I'm sorry, in bridges that are load limited or posted or only one lane throughout the state on the local system. This isn't state highways, this is our local county roads or city roads. And we got about $15 million appropriated to set up a bridge fund to fix those. It's been in the works for several years in the legislature. I worked with Chairman Brackett to get another bill amended to do that. We got it through, but Governor Little, in light of the coronavirus situation, vetoed it to essentially have some more money in his pocket for dealing with the budget issues next year. So a success and a failure there. On health and welfare, I guess the one thing I would mention is there was, I think, 3 or 4 different bills dealing with telehealth that are really pertinent at this point. You know, we were pretty cautious in moving those bills forward and wanting more sideboards. And I have to say, in retrospect, I wish we would have been a little less cautious. And I'm happy the governor has waived a lot of the requirements on telehealth so that we can provide those kind of services without direct physical contact during the crisis. And I guess I would just mention in closing, property taxes were something we talked a ton about in the legislature this year. And you know, in the end, we didn't do anything. It's really, there was no agreement anywhere. So the homeowners exemption didn't get changed. Circuit breaker didn't get changed. We didn't freeze the budgets and punish the counties and cities. But we haven't dealt with that property tax shift that was ongoing. Probably the world has changed enough now that the problem may be different when we come out of this, but we just didn't succeed on that. So that's all. I guess that's all I would say about the session. I can start sharing about the what the governor did today if you want.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great segue, Senator. So carry on, please.
Okay, Mackenzie, can you let me have control? I have a few slides I can show. I guess I can just do it.
Absolutely. I'm stopping my share now.
Give me 1 second here. So you may have seen this morning that Governor Little has had a press conference and has announced really the next phase of how we're going to recover from coronavirus. And I got surprised a couple days with a call from the governor's office to serve on one of the committees for coming out of that. And I hope I can use this occasion to tell you a little bit about what's happening in this respect and ask for some help and kind of need some short-term help, really. So the governor highlighted a phased plan over the next 2 months to loosen up the economy. Basically, in 2-week periods, we'll do various loosenings and measure and make sure we stay safe and we don't get another spike in the virus. The 2-week periods are really important because that's really the cycle for the virus. So if we do something, we need to wait 2 weeks to see if there's a response to it. So one of the parts of this during that period is he set up this advisory committee to make recommendations on how to recover from the economic damage that the crisis is encountering. And we're working really fast. We're supposed to have our first set of recommendations about the 1st of May. And again, that's kind of what I'm looking for you. And this is the charter on the committee. I can send stuff out from this if you want to. Most of this information is on rebound.idaho.gov. That's the place to go look at this point. And that's got the, I wouldn't say detailed, but relatively detailed plan on what the governor is proposing. One thing I was really pleased in our committee that we're doing, really the key foundational assumption where we're not moving past this is unless we have strong and robust testing and we have contact tracing and we have the safeguards on the virus, we don't really move forward on the economic stuff. And so his whole plan basically is take a step forward. If we're through measurement and contact tracing and our safeguards we're doing fine, then we can take another step forward. But if we don't, if we have spikes in the virus, spikes in cases, we might have to take a step back. So that's really, to do the economics, this is really the foundational thing to work on. And this committee that I'm on, which is mostly business leaders, there's the speaker and the pro tem and I are the only legislators on this committee. Its goal is really to build, how do we rebuild employee and consumer confidence in the state? Because if we open up too soon and people are concerned, they won't go to the businesses and employees won't want to go back to work. So we really need to do the things to rebuild their confidence. And I want to emphasize again, that's rebuild on top of all the safety measures of good testing, good tracking, and maintaining our social distances where appropriate. So anyway, that's the brunt of this committee's goal, is to really identify those steps. And short term, just the first one is this rebuilding the confidence. And I would really like to hear from people if you have ideas on this. What do we need to do? What are some steps that will help folks with that? And I actually need them by tomorrow. We're trying to generate our big list and review it early next week. And I'd like it, sort of in this framework. What's the idea on rebuilding confidence? What are the resources you think might be needed? And what would we get out of that? So if you have an idea, I'd like to be your conduit to that committee as we come forward. And I have to say, it's a pretty big business weighted committee. So I'm trying to play a role of representing smaller businesses and other parts of the community. So with that, that was kind of my pitch on what's going forward and what the help is I need from you now.
Carolyn and Bill, did you want to comment at all? Some of the conversations that you've been engaged in right now, please.
Sure, if I might, and I hope I'm not stealing Bill's thunder. We've been having great updates, weekly updates from our district health department, and I really would like to commend that team for the work that they're doing. And so they've shared with us to date what sorts of things they've been doing. And as you know, Nez Perce County actually has one of the highest per capita death rates in the state, or has the highest. So there's been a big outbreak in Nez Perce County. So they activated an incident command on March 3rd, and they've been kind of working on building up their partnerships and their network on how they're going to address this for our district health region from that point forward. And they've made partnerships with the hospitals, with the prison system, which obviously is a deep concern for many of us because they're a pretty vulnerable population. With the county emergency operations, there's 5 hospitals, the long-term care facilities, the sheriffs, the EMTs, fire, EMS, schools, and the tribes. And so they've really been working full-time. They have a multi-pronged approach. They are really working hard to get more, expanding our testing capacity. The state has received 16 Abbott machines that do testing, and they're going to deploy them one to each of the health districts so that we don't have to send all of our samples down to Boise. The challenge has been that the state lab is only able to process 200 tests a week. So there's been a lot more testing that has taken place at private labs instead of our state labs. So this is really going to expand our ability to do testing. They see this Abbott not only in the health districts, but then also in the prisons to make sure that there's not an outbreak in the prison population. St. Luke's Hospital and the Veterans Administration in Boise have both got 2, they each have their own processor that can do tests, and they can do 3,500 a week, so that multiplies us up to 7,000 a week that could go through St. Luke's and through the Veterans Administration. So the health districts then beyond that are organized in once somebody has been identified as having COVID-19 to be able to walk backwards, look at who they've been in contact with, and alert those people to their exposure. And so as we move forward, I think the biggest issue is going to be how we're going to be able to do testing, how we're going to be able to see who's had those exposures and continue to keep those folks who are vulnerable safe. And I think that that's something that, of course, we're all concerned about, as well as the opportunity to open our economy back up again. So it's certainly a balanced approach, and I have nothing but the highest kudos for our team here on the District 2, and our legislative district also covers District 1, Benoit and Kootenai County, and going north to the Canadian border, and they're doing a fantastic job as well. They're obviously going to need a lot more resources because they're going to be our boots on the ground here by our health districts in order to move forward safely.
Thank you, Carolyn. Bill, any comments?
Thanks, Paul. I think Carolyn really topped it off very well. I have been a participant in 3 of the public health conference calls, north of Idaho, Northern Idaho, our district, as well as the Southeast district. All of them have got some pretty good data. They're working very hard to improve that data so that the decisions that are being made with good information. I would think, Dave, as one good idea, I've asked for it, is have the public health districts take up a larger control of the decision making in the recovery. They are able to know the communities, they know the people in the communities, and they can probably provide some pretty good recommendations. One of the ones I heard that sort of stands out was it's a single person who has a single chair in a beauty shop. She had a very well laid out plan on how to deal with any kind of virus or exposure, and yet she's not able to open up. And so we have large and medium-sized and small-sized facilities and businesses. Once again, one cure doesn't cure all, or one plan doesn't make sense in all cases. So that's what I have. I talked with Percy this morning because there was some concerns brought forward about what's happening with Percy because of a newspaper ad that $239 million was lost. That's only on paper. The managers didn't sell out, so there wasn't a major loss. There hasn't been a big push on retirements as expected. Back in the big recession, we came out of that with about 73% funding, and today we're at 84% funding of the requirements. So they're looking pretty good. So Percy doesn't seem to be a problem. If anybody wants to talk with the Percy, they're not going to put out a mass paperwork. They advise you just to call them because each of you have a unique situation, and they will address that unique situation with you. So their phone lines are up and running, and things are going good. I know Carolyn and I both have been talking to the Department of Labor. There's some major problems with, especially up in the St. Mary's area, about getting service and getting on the lines. Telephones are just jammed, and they're trying to do their best to update their IT, but it's still a lot of management situations they've got to deal with. So that's what I'm from.
Thank you, Bill. And over in the chat box, we do have a couple questions and a couple comments, but Senator Nelson did post the link to the Rebound Idaho site and some of those opening up guidelines. We did have a question specific to, let's see where it was, something about barbershops opening. And I think if you go out to that website, correct me, Senator, but I think it's, I think that is in the May 1st opening. I think those are going to be open at that point.
That's my interpretation of the plan as well, that all the non-essential businesses except the ones that are specifically listed on the right column are opening up. But I've only looked at the plan for the last 2 hours. So.
I understand. Yeah, it's new to me too. Yeah. There was a question about, or a comment about, like to see, face masks mandatory in all businesses, and I'm not sure if that's something that the health district is going to recommend. Carolyn, are you aware, is that going to be the protocol that face masks will be required of in businesses that are opening?
I've heard that, and obviously Carol Muller, who's the director of our second district health district, is on the governor's COVID task force. And that is something that has been shared with her, that would be something that would help businesses so they wouldn't have to require it, that would be presented. So I know she's suggesting that through that committee.
And then a follow-up from one of our participants, who will be the first people to get tested, and is it going to be a requirement for businesses to have all their employees tested? Do we have any idea what that might look like?
I'm hearing that they're going to prioritize the healthcare workers first, and then work out from there. The other thing that's really exciting, the governor secured a I think it's made by Battelle, and they're able to recycle the N95 face masks. And so if they've already been used, like at a hospital or in a healthcare facility, they can ship them to, they're going to set the machine up at the INL, Idaho National Lab down in Idaho Falls, is providing a warehouse space and warehouse equipment to ship things in and out of there. And they can they can process up to 80,000 masks a day. And so that's very exciting because, as you know, that's a big shortage that we have, not just in Idaho, but around the nation. They want to be able to provide those not just to the medical front, you know, those on the front line of the medical side of things, but to places that we wouldn't really think about, like the mortuaries and other places where people need to be protected. Senator Johnson shared when we were on the phone too at our update with the health department that he's heard from a number of doctors who are concerned that they are treating patients and then going home and exposing their families. And so Senator Johnson has been working with FEMA to do some emergency shelter for physicians and healthcare workers who are exposed to COVID, so that they don't have to go home to their family and not have that worry. So they're looking at ways to partner with hotels and other places so that those medical providers can, you know, keep their families safe.
Sure. Thank you. There was a question about tapping into the rainy day fund to help respond to business needs. Have we heard anything about that, or is that something Senator or Representative Goesling that's being discussed as maybe an interim source of funding? I do believe that through the CARES Act that there'll be over, what is it, about $1.25 billion that come directly to the state, to the governor, and with those dollars, then you all with this task force will be able to start putting that into programs.
I've heard from, I spoke with the speaker yesterday, the Speaker of the House, and while the legislature is willing, I guess is a good way to put it, to follow the governor's lead on this emergency, I think that there will be some pushback if he starts getting into the budget without the blessing of the legislature. And so I think if we do get to the point where we need to get into the rainy day funds, we'll probably go into a special session, is what the speaker said yesterday, in order for it to go through the process as all budgets do, that we will retain our authority over budgets and appropriations. So that's the understanding I have. The other thing that I think it's exciting for me, because, you know, I've been trying to do this distance testimony for the last 5 years, and I'm excited that Kathy Dawes is on the call because she's my poster child. This might finally be the opportunity for us to be able to have distance testimony come into these committee meetings. And I spoke, and that's the reason for my phone call with the speaker yesterday. We don't know what it's going to look like. If there's a second round of COVID outbreak when we're in session next year, what is that going to look like for us as legislators? How are we going to ensure that we hear on all sides of the issue for legislation that's being presented? How are we going to keep everybody safe? Legislators are wonderful staff and of course, Idaho citizens. And so they're starting to explore what that might look like as well. So that's a big change for Idaho.
Senator, you were gonna say something?
Well, only that $1.25 billion is in the state's coffers already. It came in two installments, Friday and Monday. It can't be used to backfill budget holes. I mean, that would be a big constraint on it. So I think it's just it's going to fill in places. And I personally have not heard any talk of helping businesses with that money.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Yeah, we see, other states, Washington, our state to the west here, they've set up some funding through the governor as well as the Department of Commerce to help small businesses directly with some grants and some loans. So just curious to see if we're going to try and model some kind of program after that. So yeah, I'm sure you guys will talk about that.
And if I might add, so the governor's having pretty regular conference calls with the legislature, and we had one yesterday. And there were 70 legislators, I think, were on the phone. And that was one of the things that Alex Adams reported on. They're waiting for some additional clarification from the feds on how that can be spent. Yeah. And so they just want to be really clear, and they don't want to spend it in a way that we have to say, oops, sorry, that doesn't work. Yeah. So he's hoping to have clarification next week, by next week.
There was a question regarding the testing situation in Benoit County. They continue to report 0 cases, but do we have any sense if they've been testing up there, or anyone know any more than that?
I've been in contact with our liaison with the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and it sounds like they have had some testing underway. I don't know how broad it has been in Benoit County, but the reality is none of these counties have had broad testing, and we're just trying to get up to speed as fast as we can.
Sure.
Clearwater County still, hasn't tested any either. And they're very concerned about the Idaho Department of Corrections is still transferring prisoners around. And they're going into Cottonwood, they're going into Orfino, and those small hospitals are really concerned about what a fallout might be if an outbreak happens at those facilities. So I think that's why it's very encouraging that these Abbott testing machines are going to also be deployed to Department of Corrections.
Sure, good. Thank you. I did have a question because we have, Avista's been involved with Idaho Businesses for Education, and they did some very cursory survey work regarding internet connectivity as well as technology in the school districts. And I guess I was a little disappointed we didn't have more participation from school districts in some of that. I think there were only maybe 4 school districts in North Idaho that responded, but what are you hearing from the schools?
So I checked in with a bunch of the schools in Layton and Benoit County yesterday just about that issue, and it's a big spectrum. You go from Moscow, which probably 80% is online. They're able to provide all the parking lots are hotspots. One thing they're dealing with is that kids used to use the library or Starbucks or the co-op to get online, and those options are out. So, but for the most part, easy. Genesee and Potlatch, pretty similar, a little harder. But St. Mary's, they are totally delivering education offline, just with packets from K to 12. And they surveyed their kids right as they were leaving, and they found only 30% of the kids have reliable internet connections to be able to learn online. And equally, the teachers, the teachers don't have the capability to get online in that school district. So they're actually sitting in the buildings, making up content for packets, and they're getting good coverage. Over 95% of the kids are coming in and picking up their packets and filling them out during the week and returning them, but it is what it is. There is a big variation. The other thing that I saw IDE doing was dealing with devices. So making sure the kids had, if they were going to be out there, that they had devices. And those Layton County districts I mentioned, they all were pretty much one-to-one on devices. They've been able to get a Chromebook or a computer to any family that was missing it, so that their kids they do have the devices to go online. And they've been in some cases providing hotspots to the families if they're in town, and you know, if it's a monetary issue and not a technology issue of getting that capacity. But in St. Mary's, it's not just monetary. It's, you know, you live out on the creek and there's no internet connection. There's not even a cell phone connection there. So it's a lot harder problem. The one kind of good news I heard in talking with the school districts, they are providing a ton of meals out into the community. It's, you know, they're all either delivering meals or they're having meal pickup where they're providing lunches and breakfasts for the kids. And it seemed like to me, Moscow was a little lower because maybe the need was high, but like Potlatch was providing meals for 70% of the school district, I think. So that was great that they can do that and fill that need at this point.
The senator's reflection on the connectivity that Benoit has, I think, is a great segue for Representative Goesling to talk about the many phone calls we've been getting regarding unemployment insurance. Bill, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Carolyn. Yes, they have, I guess, a unique problem. The office up there has been closed, and the two people that were in the office are not only serving in St. Mary's, but they're going out to Kellogg and Wallace area too. So when you call up there, they basically refer you to a Post Falls office, but when you call the Post Falls office, they refer you back down to Boise. And so it's just frustrating for a lot of people. I had one person that said, stayed on the call and listened to the beep or the music for about 4 hours and didn't get an answer. So, you know, that's some of the things that we're trying to get the Department of Labor to change and at least have a local phone number that they can get into, because once it goes down to Boise, it's just jammed with all the people down there trying to get in. So it's just a challenge. And I think the problem is twofold. Is one is they didn't have enough people to deal with it. And the second is the equipment they have just can't take the load. And several of these programs that the feds are providing won't work on their computers. So it's a three-pronged problem. But I think the human factor, they're doing the best they can, but they are hiring additional people. They are now beginning to give some overtime out. I know Carolyn had about that to the governor's staff, and I have too. There's no reason why they can't open it up right now. They open the office 8 in the morning, close it at 4 or 3 o'clock our time, and then it stays. Then everybody goes home at 2 hours later. So it's a pretty short day for all the problems that people are having. So that's about what I can bring up to speed.
Thank you, Bill. There was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, maybe let me just add a couple things on unemployment. One thing, they're doing callbacks in the afternoon, sort of in the 3 to 5 or 6 time frame from labor, and they're asking for people to answer their phones because they're having trouble getting through, because I think a lot of us are trained not to answer the phone. So if you know somebody who's trying to get a hold of labor, tell them to answer their phone then. The other is and I'm going to say this wrong, but the pandemic unemployment program that the feds have provided. One segment of that is to provide some unemployment for self-employed folks, sort of the gig economy, and that's just not here yet. They've kind of got the program starting to be in place. Hopefully start qualifying people first part of May. One challenge that people are having with that is that labor's telling people to apply for that, but they get denied immediately with no word. It's going to come back in May as soon as they get the program online, and it will pay them back pay to, I think it even goes back into February. So if you hear somebody who's got a problem with that, they kind of just need to wait till May and it turns on. So, and I know that's not a good answer. I wish they were straightforward, because they're adding a lot of stress to people's lives right now. But you know, the Department of Labor processed almost twice as many claims in the last month that they did in the last year, and we've spent the last 5 years cutting back on that. So there's less people, there's less capability there. So they're scaling up fast, as fast as they can, I hope.
Yeah, and if I might add, so the challenge is, I don't know that we should say we have cut back the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor's funding oftentimes comes from the size of the unemployment pool, and because Idaho's employment levels have been so high, that has led to a decrease in the Department of Labor's funding. And so they are really scrambling to try and get ahead of things. I understand they have 96,000 unemployment claims that have been submitted, and I don't know how they're going to get through that. They have gotten approval. They've requested the ability to add personnel. My concern is, and for those of you who run businesses, it takes a while to get through the hiring process, get through the training process, get people up and running. I've really encouraged them to allow for more overtime pay for those talented folks that they already have on board. And the Moscow folks, you'll know, they shut the Moscow office down as well. And so in our district, both of our Department of Labor's no longer have a storefront. And I think that's great when you have the lowest unemployment. But when you struggle with internet connectivity, as Benawha County does, this is a real challenge and a frustration. And these folks are afraid, and they're not able to make the rent payments, and that's a tough place to be.
Yeah, and we did have a couple questions or comments about the filing process and some of the frustrations as well. And there was a question of a self-employed person, if they should get an application made sooner than later. And maybe there's a way it can just be in the system already. I mean, are we telling, I think we're encouraging everybody to get it in play already, right?
Yeah, they should apply now and get everything in play. And when the system turns on with that new program, it should automatically find them.
Good, thank you. I want to just go back though, because there was a comment or question earlier about, what we're finding is this pandemic has really highlighted and magnified the broadband deficiencies statewide. And what I'm hearing in other states and seeing, and we're having discussions, is we're going to likely see more federal resources coming down for this. And I know that Idaho has set up a broadband office now, a person, but really what needs to happen is a full-scale build out, not just piecemeal like we've seen, because even in Washington state that there's more funding available for broadband build out, it just isn't happening. And so maybe one of the good things out of this is we could really focus on a statewide deployment strategy for broadband. And maybe you can comment on that. And I'm sure, David, on the task force, this will be one of the priorities.
Well, certainly we've just only taken small steps on broadband, nothing large. I mean, seems to be a very large unwillingness to spend state resources on it. The things that we've used so far have been either Department of Ag or FCC grant programs to help people build out. And you're right, we probably need to do that bigger. I mean, we're never going to be able to deploy broadband just purely on economic reasons in our rural areas. The payout's not there, so we have to find a way to do that. I mean, I'd like to change the state's the money we pay in our phone systems and modify that so we could get some revenue for internet providing that way. I do think we're in an odd time too on broadband, though, or a tricky time, because the low Earth satellite providers are probably a couple years away from being able to start providing coverage, and that will reach our rural areas. So I do have a question on my mind: is when is the right time to invest in a big way?
Carolyn or Bill, any comments on that?
None for me.
Yeah, no, well, that's why I'm down in Lewiston, because I don't have good internet in my house. And this is really underlying. I was in Moscow this morning, but great. It's a great challenge, and especially the more rural you get. And I think that that's a really good example of what's going on with the Department of Labor, because they are really trying to drive everybody to the web, and they're like, well, try to solve your problem on the web first. And you know, that's a great thought, but it's not a great reality.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a question, and I'm sure you can all see it there, about some of our volunteer EMTs and affordable health insurance, and is there a way to purchase health insurance through the state of Idaho, or what other kind of benefits we could offer these first line defenders?
You know, that's a really great question, and I've had a conversation actually mostly with the Benoit team, and you know, there's some, you know, their concerns up there where some volunteers are better than others, and at what point should they be eligible for benefits. There's folks that sign up and then never go on a single call, and then, you know, look at what happens in Moscow. The Moscow EMTs and the Moscow Fire Department are, man, they are superstars, and they go on so many calls. I understand 500 a month for the Moscow EMTs. So I think that's a really good question, and we need to embrace the value that they bring to these rural communities and find some ways to encourage them to continue to serve, especially when they're putting so much of their life on hold and their life on the line to do the job. So yes, it is something that we've started to look into, but we haven't gotten a lot of traction with it yet.
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to respond back to some of these comments, and for some reason I can't get on a comment box. So so sorry that I'm not responding.
Well, I think these will all be available. Correct me if I'm wrong, Colette, or Mackenzie. So maybe there's some follow up there. We could post them. One thing. Another question we've had, and again, the Moscow Chamber has been a great leader, as well as our economic development organization, the Partnership for Economic Prosperity. We have pushed out a business survey, really trying to find out what those immediate short-term impacts are in our businesses. And so we've been getting participation. We've had support from the University of Idaho with both some faculty and interns to help push those out, make some phone calls, reach out to our businesses, and encourage them to take this survey. So I think we'll have some findings here shortly, and we'll make sure, Senator, that those findings are shared with you so you have a better feel, well, all three of you, but you'll have a better feel for what those needs are. Again, I think what we're hearing is obviously, you know, immediate cash flow, cash reserve needs. I think what we're going to see as we start back up are some workforce availability issues. And again, especially with those in the minimum wage jobs, there's very little incentive to get those people back working with the unemployment insurance benefits, which is sort of a double-edged sword. But again, some of those other needs out there. So as soon as we have that information ready, we will get that out to all three of you. And any businesses on the phone that haven't taken that survey, I tell you to go out to the Chamber website or the PEP website and take that survey as quick as you can.
Paul?
Yes, sir.
One thing that I did hear, and it's just somewhat of a concern, is school bus drivers are not covered under the funding coming to the education. And their concern is some of those drivers with their CDL will go and start driving trucks and other, and when school reopens, they won't have the drivers to get the kids to and from school. So that's one of those examples that you just spoke to.
Yeah, and I think we're going to need to kind of be really nimble about some just really quick workforce training programs, and obviously, making sure we have more CDL trained drivers in the pipeline. That's a great comment. Thank you, Bill.
And if I might add, and I'll pass this also along to the governor's office or Senator Nelson, maybe this be something you could pass along. We're getting a lot of emails from other organizations across the state that are offering some great resources. And if this task force to rebound Idaho is a clearinghouse, I'd like to remind people about the small business development centers across the state. They are really stepping up. They have video conferencing that is available, coaching, finance, business planning, HR, leadership. They have training events. Yesterday they had one, business survival in a challenging economy, and or I guess that was this morning, and tomorrow they have a COVID-19 employer guide, what to do with your employees during a crisis. So don't forget those other resources. The other place that I found some great resources was the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy. So, there's some really wonderful resources that are available for small businesses, and be sure and take advantage of those.
Thanks. Good point. Let's see. A question about owners of commercial properties, to the local owners apparently working with local businesses to defer rents. Non-local owners are failing to realize we are all in this storm together. Yeah, I'm hearing a little bit from some of our commercial retailers, especially the national ones, that if they're renting, that they're just not paying rent. I don't think it's as common over here, but some of the Pullman national retailers are not paying rent on their properties. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
What we've found with our rental properties is that when people are in trouble, they've just been calling us up, and I think folks are compassionate. I'm just so proud of Idahoans and Idahoans' response to this. I had heard from a constituent who didn't know if Idaho had closed down soon enough, and I mean, Governor Little closed down way before any other state did, in terms of the number of COVID outbreaks that we had across the state. So, and I think this Idaho Rebounds group is looking at, and as Senator Nelson said, looking at it in two-week increments. It's easy to pull back if things aren't going well. And I think that that's what's really important. I'm reading what these other states are doing, and it's so concerning that you dive in the deep end and you can have a lot of deep issues. And I think starting in the shallow end and learning to swim again is the right way for Idaho to do this, as painful as that is.
It's yeah, you're very right, Representative Troy, and it's very good to know that we do realize that we don't have a vaccine, and our toolkit is pretty limited on what we can do, and so we need to take those slow steps and do as much testing, scale the testing out as fast as we can, and also put the resources into contact tracing so we can make sure we find all those. I'm really heartened that seems to be sort of really the fundamental assumption on how we roll these out, because I think there was a question earlier about how do we make the students feel safe to come back. It's really the same thing as for businesses. How do we build that business confidence for both the employees to come back, students to come back to Moscow, and all of us that we're willing to go shop or engage in commerce.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, and when we look at the outbreak in Nez Perce County versus Latah County, Latah County has 11,000 kids that aren't running around there right now, and that makes a big difference. Lewiston's population hasn't changed. So Nez Perce County is dealing with every day, and Latah County is dealing with a very unusual loss of the student population, which kind of is a double whammy for our businesses up there.
So this question for all three of you, great segue. What are we hearing from our university? I know we've seen some things come out of the state board and regarding schedules, and it looks like we're going to try and have maybe a graduation for U of I students in August and a start date in late August. What else are we hearing? I mean,
Well, Paul, the money is coming, and it's already, most of it's already here. 50% has to go directly to the students for their benefit. The remaining 50% can be used for students, but it's also for the operational costs such as online expenses, those kinds of things. So talking with President Green the other day, they are just really, really concerned of all the institutions because they just finished dealing with a $22 million debit debt, and now all of a sudden they're getting a 2%, and what I'm hearing is it's going to be 5% cut and that's going to really hurt the University of Idaho. So we've got to very, very hard to protect them. One of the highlights is that their ECHO program is being used and expanded, which is one thing that we've been talking about. I did my best to get a bill passed on it this last session, but that's a gold mine for our community in terms of helping out the state. I think to show the closest between the city and the state, or city and the university, Gritman Hospital and the university got together and they opened up Targhee Hall and as an overflow for any kinds of problems with the virus. So I think that's a good sign that we're working together as a team. And when they come back, it's going to be challenging. They were asked on the state board conference call yesterday, they were asked about where they all are on their enrollments. They have no idea. They can't even project. One thing they may project is that they said we may benefit from people not wanting to go to Washington, University of Washington, or in the California schools will say, exposure here is too much. I'm leaving and going up to Idaho. So they're expecting to get some flow from that, but they are doing their best to keep people involved. And President Green's sending out great letters on every Friday, and they're keeping ahead of the students. All the students that were identified that had the virus after they left the campus have all recovered. And so that's not a situation that we were dealing with. But we really lucked out and dodged a bullet by those students being on spring break and having it extended. I think we would have been in a much different situation there in Moscow.
I guess I heard from the WWAMI medical education program, as Bill referred to, has this ECHO program where they work with rural healthcare providers on specific issues. And so we were able to secure some permanent funding for that. We tucked it away in health and welfare because there was pushback in putting it into the university budget or the education budget because they felt like it caused us to derail some other medical education funding that was important. So we have secured that program. And I just heard from them yesterday that they've been asked to take the lead on doing some information about telemedicine across the state. And so that's an area that they're looking at gearing up to do because that's likely to be a direction that we move to. And Governor Little, as Senator Nilsson talked about, has kind of opened that up a little bit. We had some guidelines for that weren't very realistic during this outbreak.
Yeah.
So that, it's always, it always makes me proud when I see the University of Idaho taking the lead, and they're certainly taking the lead here on this medical education piece. Right. Yeah. I think the other resource that I wasn't really aware of, I listen to National Public Radio every day, and so I switch back and forth between KWSU and Boise radio station, and they had a great story on yesterday. Apparently Idaho Public TV is providing classes, and they feature a teacher in each grade, and this week's featured teacher for 3rd grade is Mrs. Ringo from the Lena Whitmore School, and she taught the 3rd grade students about data and data collection. And the model that she used is she walked around her neighborhood with kibbles and selected neighborhood dogs to throw kibbles to, and kept track of how many each dog could catch. And so that's how she taught her 3rd graders about data, which I just thought was delightful. And so for those of you with kids at home, don't forget public television. It's a gem of a resource here in the state. And that is something that they can get regardless of how rural you are, because I watched it at Cavendish, Idaho when I was a kid.
Along with that, Carolyn, is IDLA has opened up their opportunities for getting information to the rural districts. So again, we're working together as a team. I'm just disappointed that we have some people out there that just want to throw stones, and it's going to make Dave's job a little bit harder trying to get people motivated in the right way. And so I don't know. I think as we get more and more information out, I think a lot of questions I got was, when are we going to have a plan? And now we have a plan. And I think if we can publicize that in the paper, Dave, that might be the first step of getting people aware that the things are starting to improve and that there is a plan to reopen, go back to normal operations.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is marketing to get people back. You know, with the caveat, we have to make sure that they believe that we're going to maintain safety as we go forward and follow the right medical procedures.
Well, some of you see I have a big M hat on because it's, springtime and the farmers are busy out in the field. So what are we hearing from the ag community? Are they not having any real challenges right now besides the normal weather and just fatigue from busy spring planting? And we got a little rain last night and today, so that's good. What else are we hearing? Any concerns about markets? I know fuel prices are way down. Somebody just bought a tanker load of diesel and was really pleased at the price. What are we hearing? Anything?
Did they pay him for the diesel?
Yeah. Yes, they did.
So I think some good news that I've been hearing is that as people have sheltered in place, they have looked for commodities that have long shelf life, and that includes pulses, so peas, lentils, beans, garbanzo beans, and they have flown off the shelf, not just in the U.S., but around the world. One of the problems has been the container shortage. Canada is just deadlocked because they don't have any containers. They're all trapped over in China. But the Pacific Northwest, apparently we still have quite a few containers. And so a lot of our legumes are getting shipped out and getting processed and getting to market. And I think that's very encouraging. So many of our farmers in the Palouse raise those pulse crops. So that is a bright star, I think, for us. Wheat prices are so tied to corn and soybean prices, and with the price of petroleum right now, it's not likely that there's going to be as much ethanol produced, and so that's going to keep that, as you know, since you're wearing an Alex McGregor hat, nodding your head there, Paul. So that's going to continue to put pressure on those downward pressure on the wheat prices. But I think the pulse prices are a bright star right now. And everybody's like 3 weeks ahead of normal schedule. So spring work's getting done in good time this year.
Well, there is a little bit of a challenge in the beef market. There's a lot of beef going to the processors, but the processors are not processing it because of the.
And they're shutting down another of the plants processing pork, I heard.
Yeah, so the
because
price
of COVID outbreaks.
Right.
price of beef is going up, and I spoke with Sam down at C&L Lockers, and the challenge is, you know, people have, such as I have, offered to donate cows or steers, but they can't process them because they're not being inspected by the USDA. So Wyoming has a new model that they just passed this session, and so I think that's one of the issues that we really would need to take a good look at. The only USDA inspector we have here is up at the university, and he's not able to come out to all the different small processing plants here locally. That's something we have to deal with.
Yeah, thanks. Colette makes a great point. And it isn't just about our large commercial producers, but we have a good number of local farms and those producers that have, you know, they've lost their local market, excuse me, their outlets, their restaurants right now. So they're all having to pivot, excuse me, around. And so hopefully we can promote those farms and encourage more local purchasing for sure. I know farmers market will open just a little later than normal, and I think they're going to focus on these local farms and ensuring that there's outlets for that local produce and other food groups.
And Paul, I just heard a really fun story since I listened to NPR out of Boise, that the Boise's farmers market is going to do a drive-through pickup, and so that so you can have somebody fill your bag up for you and then just come and pick it up. And I think they're talking to, and Colette would probably know this much better than I do, that they're trying to share that model with other farmers markets so that we're able to protect those small farmers, those specialty crop farmers in a really unique way. That farmers market is such a precious resource for this region that we need to make sure we can keep it viable.
Yep. Right.
Well, I see that all what Vista's doing their share. That was spoke to during the governor's presentation to us yesterday, that they're not waiving the cost, but they are waiving any penalties or late fees. So I think that's, you know, a good sign. So people that can, and they have their bills to pay too. So I think that's what we have to be cognizant of, that the landlords have to pay bills, utility companies have to pay bills, grocery stores have to pay bills. So, and unfortunately, the money from the stimulus money is slowly coming in. I know that a lot of people have not gotten their stimulus check yet, and so that's a headache and a heartache, because it's going to arrive, you know, after a lot of headaches and heartaches are already in place.
Yeah, you know, as a utility, we're trying to do our part. Certainly, no disconnects, and I mean, just really trying to work with all of our customers for sure. Yeah, and we're hearing some stories about people applying for some of the SBA, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, and that first flush of money pretty well got spent quickly. But I know Jenny and the chamber, as well as our economic development group, are making sure they know which banks have resources or which credit unions are participating and willing to help process with the business owner their applications and kind of serve as business concierges. So I'll encourage all our businesses on the phone, if they haven't, reach out to the chamber and PEP for some of that support. I think they're ready, willing, and able to help with some of that. We're also, and I shared this earlier with Senator Nelson, through our Inland Northwest Partners group, we've stood up a web application for our businesses that's kind of a one-stop shop, that just a quick questionnaire that you do online, very intuitive. It's called Inland Biz Strong, and we're not quite live in Idaho yet. We're still putting the back end together, but it'll be a way for businesses to navigate through answering questions and then have the resources available at the end of that quick questionnaire, so they know what they're eligible for and then what the resources and the forums available. So we'll put out more information on that in the next couple days. What else are we hearing? I know there's other resources that are companies are looking at. Cities are considering even some small business economic recovery loans and grants. I'm not aware of anything more formal than that in our district, but we may see some of those more creative kinds of loan programs coming shortly. Let's see. Yeah, and again, Colette posted a little bit about farmers market and some of the protocols. So thank you, Colette, for that information, and just encourage everybody to go out and look at the chat comments there. And then again, Jenny is encouraging people to reach out using the director at moscowchamber.com as well as info@moscowchamber.com when you reach out to the chamber. So Mackenzie, how are we on time?
We're at about 75 minutes.
Okay, so we have, I thought we had an hour scheduled, didn't we?
Just about.
Okay. Any last questions to our legislators? Last call. Again, you know, we appreciate how accessible all three of you are. And this time more than ever, you are definitely serving well. So encourage our businesses to reach out either through the chamber to the legislators or directly. There's contact information on the screen right now for all three of our legislators as well. And don't hesitate to reach out to me or Jenny at the chamber. Happy to plug you into that. And then as Mackenzie put on the slide here, the recording of the meeting will be posted on the Facebook page of the Moscow Chamber here shortly. So any last comments from our legislators?
Thank you, Paul. And
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and Senator Nelson, again, thank you for serving on that task force. I think we'll be well represented, and I look forward to having help our businesses with you on that task force. So again, I want to thank Mackenzie. I want to thank Mackenzie and Colette from the University of Idaho. Thanks so much for setting this up, and again, Jenny, for all that you do at the chamber. So everyone be well. Go ahead.
I would like to just say if you have someone that you know who's applying for who's no longer employed and that they're trying to get through the Department of Labor, the Department of Labor assured me that if I passed along or I'm sure if any of us pass along names, that they would try and make sure that check them out and see where they're at in the queue. And so I've been doing that with some folks that have reached out to me, and you know, heartbreaking stories, and you just read the stories on their Facebook page, and this is a real difficult time, and we just appreciate what a great district we represent and the kindness and the thoughtfulness of everybody in our district. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate that. And Jenny just chatted, and I think we will do a follow-up on this again as we get into this phase of recovery. I think it would be really helpful to just keep this connection strong. We had over, I think it was over 50 participants. So well done. Thank you again for setting this up, and I think that's all. So thank you again, everyone, and take care.
Go Van.